All right, and with that, the NFL regular season is over. And of course, that means it's time for the playoffs. And of course, here on the Sports Ball Network, we will be breaking down each game, giving our thoughts and our predictions, and prepping you guys for what will be an exciting slate of 2023 playoff games, starting this week with Wildcard Weekend. We'll, of course, be going in order of these games. So we'll start with Browns Texans this weekend, end with Eagles Bucks. And with that, let's get right into it. This is Sports Ball Network, and this is our wild card breakdown and predictions video. Saturday afternoon kicks off the NFL playoffs with a very exciting matchup between the number 4 seeded Houston Texans and the number 5 seeded Cleveland Browns. Houston is, of course, led by rookie quarterback CJ Stroud, who on the season threw for 4,108 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. He's been absolutely phenomenal as a rookie. Just a historic season from him. On the ground, Devin Singletary leads this team, 898 yards and 4 touchdowns for him on 216 carries. In the air, it's Nico Collins who leads the way, 80 receptions for him, 1,297 yards and 8 touchdowns. For the Browns, it's Joe Flacco at quarterback, 1,616 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions for him. He's been great lately. He's really seen a career resurgence this year. Jerome Ford on the ground, 204 carries, 813 yards, and 4 touchdowns for him. Amari Cooper at receiver, 72 yards, 1,250 yards, and 5 touchdowns. On the defense, you got guys like Will Anderson, Derek Stingley Jr., and of course, Miles Garrett. Should be a fun game. Looking at the injury report, few guys questionable for Cleveland: Cedric Tillman at wide receiver, Pierre Strong at running back, Dustin Hopkins at kicker, Kareem Hunt at running back, and Amari Cooper at wide receiver. Keep your eyes out on Dustin Hopkins in particular. He may not be in for this game, and that absolutely will affect what Cleveland does in terms of how aggressive they are on fourth downs, after touchdowns if they go for 2 points. So that's something to monitor. For Houston, Michael Dieter is questionable at center. Sheldon Rankins on the defensive line. Same with Malik Collins. Andrew Beck at fullback questionable, and Will Anderson on defense also questionable. Cleveland enters this game as the favorite, -2.5 point favorite here. Would not be surprised though if this game is a lot closer, despite the Browns being favored and despite their last matchup. Getting into that really quickly, Cleveland won their meeting earlier this year, 36-22 in a game that wasn't really close. But then again, that game, Houston also was getting Nico Collins off of a calf injury. CJ Stroud wasn't playing. Noah Brown wasn't playing for them at wide receiver. They had recently lost Tank Dell. They were going through a transition period. So would not be surprised if Houston puts up a much better performance going around. Looking at kind of the team breakdown, the Browns rank 16th in the league on offense. Houston ranks 12th. Meanwhile, Cleveland has the best defense in the league. If you've been watching them all year, that would be obvious. They're just amazing. That unit's great. Houston's got the 14th ranked defense, so not too bad as well. Cleveland, 19th ranked passing offense to Houston's 7th, and the 12th ranked rushing offense in Cleveland to Houston's 22nd. Overall, this game should be really good, and I would not be surprised if either team wins. That being said, Cleveland's a better team than Houston. Houston's being led by a rookie coach and rookie quarterback who are making a name for themselves, but still, they weren't expected to be here. They're probably still a year out before they can really compete in the tough AFC. But who knows? Still, give me Cleveland in this game. Should be a great one, though, and I really could see it going either way. Saturday night, by all means, should be a great game between the AFC West champions in Kansas City and the Miami Dolphins, who make their way over to Arrowhead. But at the same time, some recent developments could potentially challenge that notion. Miami has, as of late, and repeatedly coming up short against better competition, which culminated in the loss of the division to Buffalo on Sunday night. Kansas City, meanwhile, has struggled as of late on the offensive side of the ball over the past few weeks, losing very winnable games like the one on Christmas Day to the Raiders. But that being said, they have started to recover a little bit. Still, they could regress once again, especially considering that the weather for Saturday night looks to be absolutely terrible. The injury report has Devon Achan and Raheem Mostert questionable at running back for Miami, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle questionable at wide receiver, and star cornerback Jalen Ramsey questionable. Uh, Meanwhile, for Kansas City, Kadarius Toney, Brian Cook, Justin Ross, Devonta Smith, and L'Jarius Sneed are questionable. Brian Cook, of course, is likely to be out. He's on IR, but he could return next week. These other guys also look like they could be back this week, though. Uh, Kansas City, of course, is led by Patrick Mahomes, who had 4,183 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. Quarterback Isaiah Pacheco at running back had 935 yards and 7 touchdowns on 205 carries. Travis Kelce still led the way at receiver despite having a down year. 93 receptions, 184 yards, and 5 touchdowns for him. Tua, meanwhile, leads as the Miami signal caller, 4,624 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions for him. Raheem Mostert at running back leads the way, 209 carries, 1,012 yards, and 18 touchdowns. He had a fantastic season. And Tyreek Hill at receiver, 119 receptions, 1,799 yards, and 13 touchdowns. Also a great season for him. These two teams, of course, met in the regular season as well in London, of all places, where Kansas won 21-14. And looking at the kind of team breakdowns here, you can see that both of them obviously are great. Miami has the number one offense, Kansas City's ninth best offense. Miami has the number 10 defense to Kansas City's number 2 ranked defense. Miami has the best passing offense in the league. Kansas City has the 16th best. Miami has the 6th best rushing offense in the league, and Kansas City has the 19th best. So we could get another classic like that game in London, or if the teams struggle like they have been as of late, we might not get as good of a game. Overall, though, I still think this game is going to be a good one. Kansas City is, of course, favored here, a -4 on the spread. And really, given how Miami has performed against higher quality opponents, given how Kansas City's kind of bounced back a little bit, and given that the game is going to be played in frozen conditions where Miami typically struggles more than other teams, I would not be surprised to see Kansas City just handily win this game, moving on to the divisional round afterwards. Sunday brings us 3 more playoff games in the NFL, kicked off at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with the Pittsburgh Steelers traveling to Buffalo to play the AFC East Division champions in the Bills. And this game probably won't be that competitive. Pittsburgh is led by Kenny Pickett at quarterback in terms of statistics. He had 2,070 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions on the season, but on the field, they will likely be led by Mason Rudolph. Najee Harris, meanwhile, leads the Steelers in rushing, 1,035 yards and 8 touchdowns for him. Not a bad season by any means. And George Pickens at receiver leads the way with 63 receptions for 1,140 yards and 5 touchdowns. Again, a great season for him. Meanwhile, Buffalo is led by Josh Allen, who had a pretty good season, 4,306 yards, 29 touchdowns, 18 interceptions. Of course, he also has quite a number of rushing touchdowns as well, and overall is the league leader in touchdowns. James Cook on the ground has led Buffalo, 237 carries for him, 1,122 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground for him. Great season. Stephon Diggs at receiver, 107 receptions, 1,183 yards and 8 touchdowns. Uh, in terms of injury, Pittsburgh is missing Minka Fitzpatrick, who's questionable. TJ Watt, who's obviously out with that injury uh, to his knee. Trenton Thompson at safety. Meanwhile, for Buffalo, Gabe Davis, questionable at wide receiver. Ty Johnson, questionable at running back. Tyrell Dodson at linebacker, questionable. Deion Dawkins, offensive tackle, questionable. Rasul Douglas, questionable at cornerback. Uh, Looking at kind of the breakdowns here, you'll clearly see that Buffalo is the better of these two teams. They have the fourth best offense in the league, the ninth best defense, the eighth best passing offense, and the seventh best rushing offense. Where has a team that's something they have. They also have the 25th best offense with the 25th best passing offense and 13th best rushing offense in the league, and the 21st best defense. Uh, these teams did not play in the regular season. This is the first time they'll be meeting up. And to absolutely no one's surprise, Buffalo opens up as a -10 favorite. Uh, yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. I'd be shocked if this is anything but an absolute slaughter. Buffalo's going to obliterate the Steelers. It's not going to be close. It's actually surprising Pittsburgh even made the playoffs. They needed a decent bit of help in order to do so, and the Jacksonville Jaguars to completely and utterly collapse. But yeah, Pittsburgh is 17 to go into Buffalo, and they are probably definitely going to lose in what will be a relatively unexciting blowout. The 4:30 game on Sunday takes us away from the frigid cold of upper New York and puts us right down in the Jerry world, where the Dallas Cowboys will be taking on the Green Bay Packers. The two-seeded Dallas Cowboys, NFC East champions, are led by quarterback Dak Prescott, who's had an amazing year. 4,516 yards through the air, 36 touchdowns, only 9 interceptions for him. On the ground, he was complimented by Tony Pollard, who had 252 carries for 1,005 yards and 6 touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb in the air led the team in receiving 135 receptions, 1,749 yards, and 12 touchdowns for him. For Green Bay, meanwhile, Jordan Love in his first season as a starter was pretty prolific. 4,159 yards for him, 32 touchdowns, and only 11 interceptions. On the ground, it's Aaron Jones leading the way, 656 yards and 2 touchdowns on 142 carries for him. And receiving, rookie Jaden Reed leads the way, 793 yards and 8 touchdowns. Injury report for this one's quite impactful. Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs are both questionable here. Both could return for this game, which would be huge for this Green Bay offense. Isaiah McDuffie at linebacker, AJ Dillon at running back, also names to watch here. Meanwhile, for Dallas, not a lot of injuries here. Zach Martin at guard is questionable. Stephon Gilmore, cornerback, one of their stars on defense, questionable. Tyler Smith at offensive tackle, questionable as well. But Dallas comes in here pretty healthy. Looking at kind of the team breakdowns here, Dallas has been pretty prolific all year. Fifth best offense, fifth best defense. Looking at the offense a bit further, Dallas has the third best passing offense in the league and the 14th best rushing offense in the league. Dallas just a great team. Meanwhile, for Green Bay, they have the 11th best offense and 17th best defense in the league. Green Bay's offense, of course, breaking it down, they have the 12th best passing offense and 15th best rushing offense. This will be, of course, the first meeting of the year. And going into it, Dallas is viewed as a heavy favorite, -7.5 on the spread. But Green Bay has been playing very good as of late. They could make this thing competitive and pretty interesting, especially if Jordan Love is continuing to play at the pace he has been as of late. Still, Green Bay's a little bit young, a little bit inexperienced, whereas Dallas has established stars on both offense and defense. Game wreckers like Micah Parsons on the defensive side, studs like Dak and CD on the offensive side. Dallas is also at home. Got to factor that in. Coach Mike McCarthy as well is playing his former team. I'm sure he'd love to get a win against the Packers. Just all of this together points to a Dallas victory. Still, I think it will be competitive, but in the end, it's likely going to be the Cowboys who move on from this one into the divisional round. Sunday night takes us to Ford Field for a high octane showdown between the NFC North champion Detroit Lions against the high flying Los Angeles Rams offense in Matthew Stafford's homecoming to Detroit. Scriptwriters could not get anything better if they had tried. Detroit, hosting their first home playoff game in 30 years, faces against their former franchise quarterback and likely future Hall of Famer in Matthew Stafford, who, after leaving the Lions, won the Super Bowl. This game is going to be fun. Detroit obviously has had a great season, led on offense by Jared Goff, who had 4,575 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions in the air. David Montgomery on the ground, 1,015 yards and 13 touchdowns and 219 carries for him. Also got to mention rookie Jahmyr Gibbs, who's been an absolute stud. Amon-Ra St. Brown at receiver did his Amon-Ra St. Brown thing. 119 receptions, 1,515 yards, and 10 touchdowns. On the defense, you have an absolute stud at defensive end in Aiden Hutchinson for Detroit. Uh, Obviously, star-studded team there. They're great. For LA, they also have a ton of stars. Matthew Stafford, 3,965 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions for him. He had a great year after an injury filled 2022. Kyron Williams has really emerged for this team as well. 228 carries, 1,144 yards, and 12 touchdowns on the ground for him. And rookie phenom Puka Nacua leads the way in receiving for LA. 105 receptions, 1,486 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Of course, LA also has some stars on defense, particularly Aaron Donald, who is potentially the greatest defensive tackle to ever play the game of football. The injury report has a few notable names here. Tyler Higbee at tight end for LA, Troy Reader at linebacker, Jordan Fuller at safety, and Joe Noteboom at offensive tackle are all questionable, but could play. For Detroit, Brock Wright is questionable. Jameson Williams at wide receiver, questionable. Khalif Raymond, questionable at wide receiver. But most importantly, rookie phenom Sam Laporta at tight end is questionable with that knee injury. Dan Campbell said he could play. Got to keep our eyes on that one. Looking at the breakdown of these teams, it's very clear that both of them are more offensively oriented. The Rams have the seventh best offense in the league with the 10th best passing offense and 11th best rushing offense. Detroit, meanwhile, has the third best offense in the league with the second best passing offense and fifth best rushing offense. Both teams, meanwhile, sort of struggled on defense. LA has the 20th best defense in the league. The Lions have the 19th best. These teams have not played this year. This will be their first meeting, and going into it, Detroit enters as a slight favorite, -3 on the spread. This game, I think, could go either way. I think it's going to be the most competitive one of the weekend outside of Houston, Cleveland. Uh, but Detroit has had a great season. They're at home. They're going to really want this one. And I think in the end, it will be the Lions, the better team, who come out on top in Ford Field. Lions get their first playoff win in 30 years. And as a result, they advance to the divisional round. The final week of the NFL Super Wildcard weekend will kick off Monday night in Tampa Bay as the NFC South winning Tampa Bay Buccaneers host the struggling Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia has had an inconsistent year, to say the least, led on offense by Jalen Hurts, who had 3,858 yards, 23 touchdowns, and 15 interceptions through the air. Of course, that is not all that Jalen did. Jalen also had a very significant contribution on the ground, adding quite a few touchdowns there as well. Uh, for the rushing game was led by running back DeAndre Swift, who has 1,049 yards and 5 touchdowns on 229 carries. Receiving, A.J. Brown leads the way, 106 receptions, 1,456 yards, and 7 touchdowns for him. For Tampa, meanwhile, they are led by Baker Mayfield, who had 4,044 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions on the year through the air. Rashad White leads the way on the ground, 272 carries for him, 990 yards, and 6 touchdowns for him. Mike Evans, 79 receptions, 1,255 yards, and 13 touchdowns. Injuries, of course, could be a huge factor to watch out for in this game, as the previously mentioned Jalen Hurts is questionable, as well as DeAndre Swift. A.J. Brown, of course, has that knee injury that the team is monitoring. Devonta Smith is also questionable here. Darius Slate, cornerback, questionable too. Philadelphia's heard it. Meanwhile, Tampa comes in relatively healthy. Raheem Jarrett at wide receiver is questionable. KJ Britt at linebacker and Josh Hayes at safety, also questionable, but for the most part, they're pretty healthy here. Looking at the overall breakdown of these teams, you'll be surprised to see that the Philadelphia Eagles actually have the eighth best offense on the NFL, although personally, I thought it was the 32nd best offense with the way they've been playing. Uh, Breaking that down further, they have the 16th best passing offense and the 8th best rushing offense in the league. But of course, Philadelphia has the 26th best defense as well, meaning that they have the worst defense in the playoffs. Tampa Bay, meanwhile, will not surprise you. They have the 23rd best offense in the league, with the worst offense in the league in terms of rushing and the 17th best in terms of passing. And on the defensive side of the ball, they rank 23rd as well. These two teams did, in fact, play each other earlier this year. Philadelphia won 25-10. And going into this one, it is Philadelphia again, who is the favorite, -3 in terms of the spread. I don't know why. Clearly, Vegas has not watched the Philadelphia Eagles at all these past 6 weeks because they have gone 1-5. They've completely collapsed. And really, it would not be surprising to see Philadelphia lose. They should not be the favorites here. I would think Tampa Bay would be, considering they're at home, and they, unlike the Philadelphia Eagles, have not gone 1-5 to end the season. Still, if Philadelphia is healthy and if they're able to manage enough, they should win this game. But I would not be surprised if they don't. And instead, it is Tampa who moves on to the divisional round, which is what I'm going to predict to happen. So, there you have it. We're predicting the Cleveland Browns to beat the Texans in a very exciting game. We are then predicting the Kansas City Chiefs to take care of business against the Miami Dolphins, the Buffalo Bills to blow out the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Dallas Cowboys to take care of business against a frisky Green Bay Packers team, the Detroit Lions to win their first playoff game in 30 years, and for the Philadelphia Eagles to lose to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in an upset on Monday night. This is the Sports Ball Network, and this was our wild card round predictions. We'll catch you in the recap and in next week's divisional round prediction video. Peace out, everyone.